in shootouts where the lines between defense and execution blur fast. Some of the cowboys may have been guilty. Others, like Cruz, were likely scapegoats. They caught the stray dis. You know what I mean? Wyatt and his posse left Arizona territory as fugitives. The lawman had become an outlaw and didn't seem to care. Wyatt Earp, the man behind the legend, hero, outlaw, or both. This is Cracked Relic, and this is our deep dive. There are few names in American history that echo like a six-shooter across time quite like Wyatt Earp. To some, he's the ultimate symbol of frontier justice, the stoic, unflinching lawman who stood tall against lawlessness at the OK Corral, a man who brought order to chaos with nothing more than a badge, a Colt revolver, and a cold stare. He's been played by everyone from Burt Lancaster to Kurt Russell. He's had books, ballads, and blockbuster films crafted in his honor. And in the American imagination, he's larger than life, somewhere between a cowboy, a knight, and a saint. But what if the man behind the legend wasn't quite so clean-cut? What if the real Wyatt Earp was more drifter than sheriff, more opportunist than hero, a man who wore the badge when it suited him and abandoned it just as fast? What if he played a key role in making his own myth, carefully shaping his legacy long before Hollywood did? Today we're digging deep into the life, lies, and legend of Wyatt Earp. We'll follow him from his dusty childhood in Iowa to the blood-soaked streets of Tombstone, Arizona, and all the way to the movie lots of Los Angeles. And at every step, we'll hold the myth up to the light and compare it to the truth. This isn't just a story about one man. It's about how legends are born, who benefits from them, and what gets left out when history becomes Hollywood. Welcome to Cracked Relic. This is Wyatt Earp, the man behind the legend. Hero, outlaw, or both? Chapter 1. Roots of a Restless Man. Here's the myth. Wyatt Earp was born into the frontier, strong, brave, and destined for greatness. From a young age, he was trained in the ways of justice by a noble father and raised with the principles that would shape his life as a lawman. Okay, but here's the truth. Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp was born in 1848 in Mammoth, Illinois. Not exactly the Wild West, but a sleepy town in a very divided country. His father, Nicholas Earp, wasn't exactly a noble figure. He was a restless man, part lawyer, part farmer, part con man. He moved his family constantly chasing land deals, fleeing debts, and often failing to provide stability. Wyatt's early years were marked by upheaval. The family moved frequently, from Illinois to Iowa to California and back. He wasn't a prodigy or a gunslinger in training. He was just a boy trying to find solid ground. I feel that. I've been moved around a lot myself as a child. In 1864, during the Civil War, a teenage Wyatt tried multiple times to enlist in the Union Army, but was turned away because of his age. Instead, he helped drive freight wagons and did odd jobs. What we don't often hear about in the legends. In 1871, Wyatt was arrested for horse theft in Arkansas. He skipped bail and fled the state, a crime that would shadow his early years. So no, he wasn't born into law and order. If anything, he was born into chaos and learned to survive in it. In the early 1870s, Wyatt bounced between towns. Peoria, Wichita, Dodge City, just working odd jobs that often skirted the edges of legality. In Peoria, he was arrested multiple times for frequenting or working in brothels. Some historians argue he may have even worked as a bouncer or enforcer inside them. Which, I mean, those ladies need some protection, you know? Especially back then. By 1875, Wyatt found himself in Wichita, Kansas, a rowdy cow town overflowing with saloons, gamblers, and gunslingers. It was here he first wore a badge, working as a part-time policeman, but even then, his motives weren't exactly pure. Law enforcement in towns like Wichita and Dodge was often more about keeping the peace just enough to keep business booming, not about high ideals. Wyatt wasn't just a lawman. He was a gambler, a hustler, and at times, a muscle for hire. His time in Dodge City, the next stop on his trail, would make him famous, but not always for the right reasons. Chapter 3: Dodge City, Peacekeeper or Politician. The myth at hand here is that in Dodge City, Wyatt earned his reputation as a fearless enforcer of law and order. His presence alone could break up fights. He was respected by citizens and feared by outlaws. But the truth, in Dodge City, Wyatt Earp did make a name for himself, but not just by enforcing laws. He was deeply involved in the town's gambling scene, profited off vice, and often blurred the lines between law and outlaw. He worked alongside men like Bat Masterson and Doc Holliday, figures who also danced on both sides of the line. So what I'm thinking is like, think cop, but slightly corrupt. Earp's legend claims that his steely presence could break up barroom brawls without violence. While he may have had a calm demeanor, he also wasn't afraid to use his fists, or a pistol butt. He was involved in multiple altercations and shootouts, though often with legal gray areas. More importantly, Wyatt's time in Dodge taught him how to navigate power. He aligned himself with moneyed elite, defended saloon owners over cowboys, and understood that law was as much about politics as it was about peace. Which, I mean, facts. Like, that's today, even. Chapter 4: Tombstone. The legend is born. So here's the myth. Wyatt Earp came to Tombstone to bring justice to a lawless town, facing off against the criminal cowboys in the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. Which, they made a movie about it, so it's got to be true. Oh, crap. But wait, here's the truth. By the time Wyatt arrived in Tombstone in 1879, he was not a lawman. He was primarily interested in silver mining and business. He joined his brothers Virgil and Morgan and quickly got involved in the political tensions tearing the town apart. Tombstone wasn't a lawless wasteland. It was a booming town with its own justice system, bitterly divided between two factions: the Earps and their allies, businessmen, politicians, and city officials; the cowboys, ranchers, rustlers, and Democrats with strong rural support. When the famous gunfight at the OK Corral happened on October 26, 1881, it wasn't a clear-cut shootout between lawmen and outlaws. It was a political assassination, driven by months of personal, legal, and political animosity. The fight lasted 30 seconds. 3 cowboys died. The Earps and Doc Holliday walked away. The immediate aftermath was messy. The Earps were charged with murder. A lengthy legal battle followed. Eventually they were cleared, but public opinion was deeply divided. This wasn't justice, it was retribution. Chapter 5, The Vendetta Ride. So we're going to obviously start off here with the myth. After the murder of his brother Morgan, Wyatt Earp led a righteous crusade against the cowboy gang, delivering frontier justice where the courts had failed. Okay. It's kind of like one of those you want the good news or the bad news type situations, because here's the truth. What really happened was less a crusade and more a revenge-fueled bloodbath. Kind of like, I don't know, if somebody killed my dog, I'd do the same thing. On March 18th, 1882, Morgan Earp was gunned down while playing billiards. Another brother, Virgil, had already been ambushed and maimed months earlier. Wyatt snapped. With the legal system dragging its heels, Wyatt gathered a posse, including Doc Holliday, and began what's now known as the Vendetta Ride. Over the course of several weeks, they hunted down and killed multiple men they believed were responsible for Morgan's murder. No arrests, no trials, no badges. One of the first targets was Frank Stillwell, who was found shot to pieces near a rail yard. Others, like Florentino Cruz and Curly Bill Brocious, were killed in shootouts where the lines between defense and execution blur fast. Some of the cowboys may have been guilty. Others, like Cruz, were likely scapegoats. They caught the stray dis. You know what I mean? Wyatt and his posse left Arizona territory as fugitives. The lawman had become an outlaw and didn't seem to care. Chapter 6, Drifting, Gambling, and a New Image. Good news or bad news, folks? Let's just go ahead and start with the bad news. The myth. After Tombstone, Earp faded into obscurity, a forgotten relic of the Wild West, if you will. You see what I did there? The truth, far from forgotten, Wyatt kept chasing fortune and began curating his own myth. He drifted across the West, running gambling halls, refereeing boxing matches, and working mining claims. At one point, he ran saloons in San Diego. In another, he was accused of fixing a boxing match between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey, a scandal that dogged him for years. But perhaps most importantly, Wyatt became aware of how people viewed him. He began telling his own version of events, polishing the legend. He attempted to get his biography published multiple times. He hired ghostwriters and gave selective interviews. One writer, Stuart Lake, would go on to polish Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, in 1931, 2 years after Wyatt's death. It became a sensation. It was also mostly fiction. Lake took Wyatt's vague recollections and turned them into gospel, crafting the version of Earp we see in movies to this day. Chapter 7, Hollywood's first gunslinger. The bad news, the myth, Wyatt Earp had nothing to do with the rise of Hollywood's cowboy craze. The good news, the truth, Wyatt was Hollywood's first real-life gunslinger, and he knew it. In his final years, Wyatt settled in Los Angeles with his common-law wife, Josephine Marcus. There, he rubbed elbows with silent film stars and directors. He visited movie sets and gave advice on authentic cowboy behavior. Air quotes that. He was friends with Tom Mix, William S. Hart, and even a young John Ford. Earp became something of a mascot, a living relic of the Old West to a town just learning how to mythologize it. Some accounts even claim Wyatt was on set when John Wayne first learned how to walk and talk like a cowboy. Whether that's true or not, his influence on early westerns is undeniable. He died in 1929, not in a gunfight, but in bed, at the age of 80. That's old. I mean, that's old. For somebody who did all that in the past, that's old. That's like quite literally a cowboy living to 80 years old. It's crazy. You know, because like usually they were dying young and all that, especially if they were minors and stuff. Chapter 8. The legend lives on. After Wyatt's death, the legend exploded. Naturally. It's usually how they, an artist dies and all of a sudden they're super famous, right? Stuart Lake's book turned him into a larger-than-life figure. Hollywood followed with films like My Darling Clementine, Gunfight at the OK Corral, and Tombstone, which we all know. Each added new layers of fiction. He became the ultimate American archetype, the lone lawman who does what's right, no matter the cost. But when we strip away the legend, what do we find? We find a man who broke laws as often as he enforced them, gambled, ran saloons, and possibly brothels, took justice into his own hands when it suited him, and carefully sculptured his own legacy long before anyone else could. Was he brave? Yeah. Was he a criminal? Sometimes. Was he a hero? Well, that depends on who's telling the story. And to be clear, this is not a hit piece on Wyatt Earp. This is just myth versus truth, okay? I'm not over here demeaning his successes, but we're also going to point out, the truth here, because that's what matters. Chapter 9. The final thoughts. Why the myth matters. Wyatt Earp isn't just a man. He's a mirror. He reflects what Americans want to believe about themselves. That when the world gets messy, someone will stand up and do what needs to be done. That the line between law and justice can blur. And that's okay, so long as the right people win. But the truth is, history is never that clean. Wyatt Earp was many things. A brother, a gambler, a gunman, a survivor, and a self-made legend. If we remember him only as the clean-cut marshal from the movies, we miss the real story and the real lessons. Because sometimes the man behind the legend tells us far more than the legend ever could. And I think we can learn from that. This has been Cracked Relic, a deep dive on the history of Wyatt Earp. If you like this video, just go ahead, please like, sub, comment below if you'd like me to do a deep dive on anybody else, and we'll try to get to it as soon as we can and everything like that, because I'm just trying to record some stuff right now. I got a list. I would love your support, and those who keep coming back and watching, and those who are watching and not subscribed. Hey, welcome home, bud.